good. Now I feel like I have a pretty good feel of where we're at and now where we're going to be trying to go with the building. So, but I'll talk a little bit about what we did last year. You can see our free reduced crept up a little bit for this school year by a couple percent. Again, compared to the school district, or district totals anyways. So it's 63%. And again, kind of just the overview of talking about the statewide accountability testing through MCAs, the different FAST testing that we do with our K through 2 students. Let's see if it goes. There we go. All right. So to begin with, this is our early math assessment with kindergarten, and I think this is a graph we would like to see more of in terms of in the fall. You see where everybody comes in at, and then by the spring, I guess where everyone was able to move towards. So lots of green, which is what you want to see, minimal red, and even got some blue there at the top. So again, really nice growth within the math. Am I working on it? Oh. Okay. First grade, you can see, again, kind of came in, with close to 40% kind of being in that red area. And we probably got it down to around 10% as a grade level in the spring for first grade math. And you'll kind of see math is more stronger results compared to reading here as we get to that. Second grade, I'll be honest, we got a little bit of work to do in terms of, we increased a little bit more of the positive, the green and whatnot, but that red really didn't move a whole lot, and so that's been some conversation for us thus far this school year. So math, all grades, in terms of comparing us to state, you can see the state was 55, 56%, and we were around 43% with our math MCA. So this is grades 3 through 5. It's not necessarily the trend that we are hoping for, but that is the results that we got last year. And as we go along, you'll kind of see where or how that happened. Growth, that is something that we are, although the data itself isn't in terms of the actual achievement, doesn't look where we want it to be. We did have nice growth overall, especially within reading in this area. As I'm looking at it, 57% within math here, either our students with medium or high growth compared to the state. Third grade, here's kind of their breakdown. You can see the state average last year was 66, and we're right at 56. So a nice little, a little up there from year to year for us as a grade level. Last year, state average, again, 64%. We're about 54, 55%. Again, we went up as a building, which is trending in the right direction. But again, we want to get more towards, the state averages, if not higher. That's obviously the goal. Let's see, you can see our growth there, again, within math, having 73, 74% growth within math. I think that's really something that our building, as we talked early on, that we felt as a staff was good to see, and the building was really happy that was the case. Excuse me. So fifth grade, state averages, 52%. Unfortunately, that's where our hiccup was as a building, 20% proficiency. I think when everyone saw that, it was kind of a, whoa, what happened here? So we broke a lot of things down last year in terms of what we could. We've talked more extensively about it here this fall now that we have more data to better understand that. And now, again, we've been making plans in terms of moving forward, so hopefully that is just kind of a bump in the road. Again, student growth there, and this is just for 5th grade, and again, with having just a 20% proficiency, you're not going to have probably the level of growth that you're looking for. So being just over, 40% compared to 65-ish% for the state, again, that 20% did not help out there. All right, so now we're coming to our reading K through 2, and again, we extended our green, in terms of where kids are at percentile-wise. That yellow maybe didn't close as much as we would like, and actually we've had quite a bit of conversation around that this fall in terms of where kids are at within the FAST percentiles, and where do we really expect them to go, or where do we plan for them to go really, so that we can maximize the achievement that's happening in classrooms. 1st grade, again, that red just obviously a little bit more than what we would be hoping for, but we did extend those students that were in the green. We extended them, a few of them anyways, into the upper categories there of within their reading area. 2nd grade, did a nice job of trying to trend in the direction that we wanted to, as they were really last year focused within their PLC, and you can see the work that they did do. Again, it's not exactly the way that we want it to be in terms of trying to have more of the green like you saw on that first slide, but it was trending the right way, and you could tell that they're on the right track within what they're doing within reading. All grades reading, so we're 44% as a building compared to 60% as a state. All grades student growth. Again, you can see, with where we're at within reading. What's that? 72, 73%. Growth there. 73% high to medium growth within reading last year. The actual achievements, again, on the other hand, that's where we've had some other conversations too about trying to transfer what we have been doing, what the students are doing. So, rather than just the concepts and what they're working on, to actually now transferring it to other assessments that they're doing to really show what they know, because, their growth is there, the skills are starting to be there, but how do we get them to hopefully show that here, so that, again, just the numbers can reflect just how hard not only the staff is working, but the students are trying to learn there at Hawthorne. 4th grade academic reading achievement, again, about 39%. Yeah, again, not exactly where we want to be. 4th grade growth, on the other hand, again, nice number there in terms of, where they're at. So again, it goes back to they're showing good growth, but again, the achievement is not showing up. 5th grade achievement, was that 47%? So it's, again, a dip from the year before, compared to the state of 66%. And then their growth as well, so 68, 69%, which is pretty in line with what we saw across the state. Science, so our 5th graders, this is where they're at with things, or where they were at with things last year. So 55% for the state compared to 48%. And again, we actually were talking about that today in terms of what are some things that we can purposely do to increase, not only for this, MCAs, but just their overall opportunities in class to have authentic experiences that will allow them to be more excited and interested and really want to try and excel in this area that, I think, is not quite maybe given as much time as I think a lot of people would like it to. This is our EL progress. This is definitely a highlight for us in terms of where we're at and what we're doing. We brought in Amy Young from MDE last year as a district, and very purposely using Talk, Read, Talk, Write. And you can see some of the early results within the EL, our EL students in terms of, their growth at 71% compared to the state. And then meeting targets, 48%, which is, again, about 8% higher than the state. Consistent attendance, the nice thing, we've got our kids pretty much there every day. I mean, we've got a block of a small percent of kids that we continuously work with to try to talk to their families and work on plans to get them to school each and every day, or at least consistently. But overall, what you can see there is, compared to the state and even within our school district, we have kids and families that value what we're doing. All right, and then just a few other things, just for me, again, just wrote down some different things. We know that, again, if you just look at the data, it's maybe not the most inspiring set of numbers that are there. And we know it's a big challenge, and we're not where we want to be at the moment. Last year, again, having 73% high to medium growth in reading, 57% in math. Again, staff felt good with, especially with the reading. You can see per our Panorama survey, that's where students have the opportunity to kind of rate or be surveyed on their teacher. 98% of our kids know that we care about them. And again, when you think about having a safe environment for our kids to be able to come to and hopefully, again, just excel and be excited at, to be able to hear that 98% of our kids are, they know that we care and we want the best for them, I think that means a lot. When you talk about building goals going into this year, from what I understand, traditionally the building's kind of talked about, well, let's try to be realistic with our goals, but so like a 4% jump from our reading and math goals has been done. But this year we talked about making it at least 8%, so getting us into that 50th percentile with kind of the unofficial goal of trying to, again, be at statewide averages, because now we're at least getting into the ballpark of where, the rest of the state is anyways. Our fall FAST data is encouraging, 3 through 5, as we have 74% of our kids. Again, this is our FAST testing, but 74% of our kids have the potential to meet or exceed proficiency on the math MCAs. So we're coming into things, again, with that belief that, okay, as long as we keep those kids that are in the green where they're at, and we can really, do a great job with our instruction this year, we've got a real nice chance, to really set some nice bars for us. And then, again, just to kind of let you guys know, too, again, we've met a lot as a staff to, discuss data, but also just to discuss our own just practices and what we do. I mean, we do a great job with our kids with responsive classroom, but we also really need to focus and try to match our instruction and what we do for our kids each and every day. The staff work extremely hard. Now we just need to, again, focus a little bit more with that, and through our PLC process, our commitment to the standards, that work so far has been outstanding. I'm very pleased with that. The psycho work, the discussions, the responses to the student need and data so far has been, again, impressive. Our really great reading that we brought in last year as an elementary group across the district, very encouraging. And again, our EL talk, read, talk, write strategies are now being not only used in EL, but they'll be used across the building as well. So again, I would love to sit here and tell you that the data doesn't matter, because it does. But we are definitely doing our best to make some plans that will turn this around, and hopefully turn this around quickly to, again, match the work that we are doing as a building. So there you go.
I have a question regarding grade level collaboration between elementaries. How much time is really spent talking about, like first grade, second grade, third grade, and so on? How much time do they get together to say, this is working for us, and we think this is the way we should move forward?
That's a great question. Last year we started really working together vertically as a building, K through 5, to discuss math and what the standards are and what that looks like, again, K-5, and even into K-6, so that 5th grade could get an idea of what they need to try to point to as well. So we started doing that. We had a couple times last year where we met. We'll actually be doing just that on the 21st here as a building on a couple different spots during the day to continue those conversations, to better understand, what does this standard look like in 1st grade compared to where they need to get to in 5th grade, and have those conversations about, what is really essential, what do we need to make sure that we cover as a building, as grade levels, as individuals in classrooms, to make sure that we are, again, working smarter and not necessarily harder, and in silos, where, again, just being more collaborative.
Just to kind of add on to that,
yeah.
And that this last school year, we did not get together, I don't believe, at any point for grade level teams across the building or across the district. The year before that would have been the year before Mr. Mahal came, I think we had 2 or 3 days of our PD time where we did spend some time in kindergarten bands across all 4 buildings, or 1st grade bands through across the building. And we found a lot of value in that. And yet we also found that that's a great cost to our students when we are taking kids out of or teachers out of the classrooms and having teachers come in to sub for them.
Can I make a comment as well? In addition to the grade teachers getting together, what kind of conversations are taking place among principals to ensure consistency in what's working across buildings? At our last meeting, we had one elementary who had really turned things around, and then another elementary that was showing the same downward pattern, and it is, that part is concerning as well. So what kind of communication, if any, is going on as far as what works in buildings?
Good question, and yes, we do meet as an elementary group or principals. We try for every other week, or at least every 3 weeks, to be able to meet, and we have an agenda to be able to go over and talk about Oh, boy, any number of things that are going on, whether it, again, be reading, the math, really great reading, EL, I mean, you name it, we kind of have the opportunity to have conversations so that we can continue to work together, so we can try to be as consistent as we can be within the buildings. Just because we know the importance of, you know, if we have a student transfer from Hawthorne and go to Lakeview, you know, we want to make sure that, you know, he or she is not leaving, you know, one spot, you know, in the curriculum and going to somewhere where Lakeview is already 2 weeks, 3 weeks down the road, or vice versa. So we're definitely in communication all the time. I've very much appreciated that about the elementary group, and just administration in general in terms of having those conversations so that we can try to be as cohesive as possible. And that will definitely continue as we move forward.
And do you also discuss the different social aspects of reaching out to the families and providing that social support to families as well?
Through our second step curriculum, like SEL type thing, is that what you're referring to?
Oh, I know that Tanya, when she presented at our last meeting, talked about different outreaches that they do have to families, and
Sure.
and they seem to be turning around.
Yeah, and so I can't speak for those businesses because I apologize, I don't know that, but I know we have our multicultural night coming up here in early November to be able to have that outreach and those conversations with families. You know, again, with of course with PTOs and different communications home, you know, newsletters and all that. Yeah, we're definitely trying to communicate and make sure everything that should and can be communicated is.
And one final question on the bar graphs. If you could go back to some of the bar graphs that compared us against the state. Keep going. Yeah, like this. How come they don't go up to 100%? It looks like 100% were tested, but how come the bar graphs don't go to 100% on many of these?
I guess I can't 100% answer that just because I didn't make the slides. That's I guess a good question.
I guess I just didn't notice that with our other presentations. I didn't know, maybe they did have it that way, but I wonder, because I like to look at graphs, and so I wonder why, you know, they aren't 100%.
I believe they're all, I mean, all except for, of course, the data that's in it is all different, but it's the layout itself is all the same. So I'm guessing it was similar, and you'll probably see a similar graphs, although different results maybe on next year coming up.
Thank you. And will we be receiving a copy of these slides as well if we haven't already?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Just interesting as you look at the graphs, when you look at the statewide and then the local ones as well, the state appears to be having some of the same issues, that the percentages are dropping.
Mm-hmm.
From a state perspective, is there anything that they've been talking about that this is what's going on, and any ways that we can help change that? Is it because of the many more cultures we're getting to come into the communities, into the state, or I just noticed that it follows a similar pattern?
Yeah. In talking with various colleagues around the state, you know, they pretty much everyone, I want to say, except for like 10th grade science, everyone went down across the state last year with quite a bit of their scores. You know, again, is that because of, you know, the snow days? Is that because of, you know, the tests maybe being, you know, with them being are they harder? It's hard to say. I guess I haven't heard anything definitive in terms of what that's looking like, but absolutely, I mean, communities, you know, are definitely very diverse, and, you know, we have to meet those challenges, you know, in terms of making sure that we're prepared for anyone and anybody that comes through.
Dennis, you're right. I think that was well covered by the major newspapers that test scores across the state had dropped.
Yeah. Although I do have, sorry, I had to send it, or I saw it, and I figured I would share. For what it's worth, if you look at the Star Tribune's Beating the Odds article, that, which was a couple weeks ago, s- based on their information for Hawthorne Elementary, we met expectations within math, and we also met expectations with reading. Kind of says student proficiency at the school met expectations for the given year. Given our model, they were predicted to have a proficiency passing rate of whatever it was. So again, there's so many different angles you can look at all this information and to see that. Okay, I guess I don't know if I completely agree with all of that, because again, I think we all want to see this proficiency rate be higher with everything that we do. And again, I can definitely sit here and tell you that we're doing what we can to make sure that that happens.
So is that model like a formula with like free and reduced and ELL and those kind of things?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, I can share it. I mean, you guys, I thought it was interesting myself.
Okay, thank you, John.
Yeah, thank you guys. Appreciate your times.
Nick? Lakeview Elementary update.
John turned this off on me. So, good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having us here over the last couple of school board meetings, and I'm certainly, it's my pleasure to take some time here to share with you all where Lakeview sits in regards to our data, comparatively speaking. So, much of what you are going to see here might be very similar, I guess, in presentation style as to what you saw from some of the other buildings. Trend-wise, you are probably going to see a lot of similarities as well. And yet at the same time, there are quite a few things that we at Lakeview have to celebrate when we have to look at our data. And that's one thing that I know I have to always keep in mind is what is it that we can really celebrate? What can we be proud of? And what can we feel good about as we move forward this year into our school year as well? So here is our free and reduced lunch count percentages at Lakeview. You can see just kind of hovering above the 50 percentile for us at this point in time last year, and then this year we're going to scooch up a little bit more, or I'm sorry, scoot down a little bit more underneath that 50 percentile marker for us. But we're all pretty close to the same from year to year when we think about that group that we're servicing at our school. From here, we're going to jump into now just some of that reporting data that has been shared with you for us, and we'll go ahead and get started with. There we go. Our kindergarten math academic achievement from our early math assessments. You can see from fall to spring, there's a lot to be proud of and a lot to be happy about in terms of shrinking that red margin and growing the green margin. And so we can see that there's been a lot of growth for our students over the course of last year from when they took the test in the fall to when they took it into the spring. So feel pretty good about that. And yet at the same time, one of the pieces that we want to be looking at here too is the fact that that green group is a pretty large group when you look at the percentile side of things, 31 to 85%. That takes a wide span of numbers there. And so we look to disseminate that out even more, to just look at it and say, all right, within that group of students who filled that 31 to 85 percentile, just where are our students landing within that? Are they kind of in the middle? Are they on the upper end of that 85% or up to that 85 percentile or a little bit lower? And just how do we continue to work with our students to move them and to grow them as well? But by all accounts, to see that the below 20 percentile group in that fall to spring math is pretty well gone is something that our kindergarten teachers can certainly be proud of, and something that our building can be proud of as well. First grade, we saw some additional growth there with our green group, that 31 to 85 percentile. We saw our students who were in that below 20% group shrink quite a bit as well too, and we added into that 85 and higher percent group in blue. So we can be very happy about some of the work there in first grade for us too. Second grade, Second grade, again, we can see some building from fall to spring, and some really good data for us there too, and we can assume that we replaced maybe some of the students who were in that yellow group with some that were in that red and just kind of shifted everything up. As we wrap up the FAST testing here that we're looking at, we also know, though, that there are a lot of students that we still want to continue to reach. Still a lot of students, no matter where they are within those percentiles, that we still want to reach and help move forward and continue to grow too. But we can be really happy with the work that we've done so far, K2. From here, we're going to shift into our math academic achievement for math MCAs. And you can see in the lower left-hand corner there the percent proficient for Lakeview, and this would be all grades 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. A little bit of a downshift from where we've been last year, from 75.9, almost 76%, down to 72.8%. And so, although that is a number that is still certainly well ahead of what the statewide average is, it's still a number where we're seeing, I think Jill had mentioned that downward tick a little bit by a little bit. And so we want to be conscientious of that and understanding of that so that we can start maybe reversing some of the challenges that we might be seeing in math in particular. We're happy with 72.8 as a number by itself, but when we see where we've been at before, we know that we can certainly get back there, and it's going to require some additional work with our students and with our staff as well. But to be almost 20% above the statewide average, we're certainly happy about what we're seeing there too. Student growth for math. For Lakeview there, you can see that we're low, medium, high growth. The medium high is the group that we really want to look at, and when we see that number being just a little bit over 60%, it doesn't compare to where we've been in years past, and I'm sure you can make a direct corollary back to, well, then that's probably why we're seeing some of the challenges, or maybe that downward tick, I shouldn't say challenges, but that downward tick in our proficiency as well. So we've got some work to do here, and as we break down our grade by grade data, you'll probably be able to see a little bit more closely as to where our numbers fall and why our numbers might fall where they're at as well. But some work left to do there for our growth when it comes to math, that's for sure. Grade 3 math academic achievement, 74.5. So you can see from last year to this year, we had just over a 3% increase there, or just a little under 3% increase there. Still scoring above the state where we're at with what we're doing too. That blue exceeds bar right on the left-hand side is something that I feel really good about too, with our 3rd graders in particular. That's a good chunk of our 3rd graders that are scoring at that exceeds level, which is awesome. And yet it creates a little bit more of a challenge for our 4th graders this year to see how they're going to work with a group of students who are achieving at such a high rate to then continue to grow them. So that's where you see some of that growth come into play that we saw before too. But a good number of our kids, and that meets and exceeds is really good, especially at 74% together, but it's looking pretty close to half and half on both of those, half meets, half exceeds. So that's really great to see where our students are at. Grade 4, you can see here that this is an area that we saw a pretty big change from last year to this year. Last couple of years, 4th grade has typically been a grade level for us that has done a fantastic job with where they've been scoring 20 plus points or so. You can see well into the 80s for us on the proficiency, and then this past year we took a dip down into the 66.7 area. So definitely look at it as what do we need to be focusing on, what might be helpful for us to know from that data. In particular, what does that data tell us about our current 5th graders that we're working with, because this is our last year's 4th graders, and where does that lead us from here? And so definitely gives us some opportunities for growth, not only in 4th grade to identify maybe some of the areas that maybe we didn't perform quite as high as we have in the past, but then also take that information and that data to determine where we need to go with our students who are currently in 5th grade that took this test last year. And then, of course, when you see a 66% proficiency, the growth isn't going to be quite the same either there. So we're just maybe a little bit over 50, little under 53% making medium or high growth for our students at Lakeview in 4th grade last year. So definitely something that we've noticed and we're going to continue to work on. So grade 5 academic achievement, you can see there a 6% jump from where we've been before last year, from 70.5 to almost 77%. So certainly an area for us to celebrate with this group for sure. When we go back and compare some of that data though, if you remember that our 4th grade group, if we go back 2 slides actually, you'll see that our 4th grade group as 2008, 84.8% proficient. That same core group, essentially, probably a few kids in, a few kids out. Again, pretty good at 77%, but not quite at that same number as what we were as 4th grade. And so when we look at the next slide and we start thinking about how that looks for growth, you can see here again that although our medium and high growth is a little bit better there at 72%, it's still not necessarily as high as you might think for a grade level that's achieving at 77%. Which again is well above where the 5th grade statewide average is. That would explain a lot. We go from 80-some% to 77%. Still a really good number, but that will show us a lot for the growth side of things. Moving into reading, you can see here we start with our kindergarten FAST test scores. Shrunk that red below 20% group down quite a bit. Increased our green and of course our blue there too. So some pretty positive things coming out of kindergarten as we look at our data here. 1st grade, you can see on our next slide, is going to show us some interesting information here. You know, a little bit of a decrease in our red. Maybe our yellow is staying about the same if we were to side by side it and have the actual numbers, but you can see we increased our 85 percentile and above group, and probably kept our 31 through 85 pretty close, maybe a tinge or two difference there, but nice to see the growth into the blue, that's for sure. 2nd grade, again, we can see some moderate growth here for our students with shrinking our red groups and growing our green group there too. So some pretty positive stuff. From there, we'll get into our reading MCA tests. And here is where we're going to see our all grades. By all intents and purposes, we're pretty flat from last year to this year. I guess you could say it's 1.5 points or so that we've increased. So we can feel pretty good about that, I suppose. But at the same time, you can see 3 years ago we were pushing 70%. And now we're scratching to try to get back to 65% and move forward with it. And so we can feel a little good about not going backwards when Dennis just shared the information about just statewide how things are going. But at the same time, we understand that the big picture here is that there's a lot of opportunity for growth for our students at Lakeview, in particular when it comes to reading. And any staff member that you talk to would share that same sentiment. I think last year I sat here and I shared with the board that we've had some really good, honest conversations about how our students are doing K-5 in reading, and we know that there's a lot of students who we need to really be able to reach and grow with, and that hasn't changed this year at all. And I'll get into the what next part of things as we wrap up a little bit here too. But I think to a person, our staff would agree that we know reading is the focus. We don't want to forget about math, but reading is the focus, then the data shows us why it's the focus. Reading growth for our students, 4th and 5th grade as a group. Here again, you can see that we're maybe just at about 75% roughly on that. So something to be positive, to feel pretty good about maybe. But we're still seeing a large chunk of our students in that low growth area. And we certainly want to change that around, identify reasons why. From here, we'll go into our grade to grade level groups. We saw some nice change from our 3rd grade group from last year, 55, 56, up to 65 or so percent. So we saw a nice change there, especially with being able to add in some students who are in that exceeds level. And so that was really good to see. But again, well above 10 percent points above where the statewide group is meeting at, looks like about 55% there. So some positive pieces to take from there, certainly. Fourth grade, again, this is an area that has caused some concern in our building to see that, you know, our math scores last year jumped or moved from 80-something down to 66, and now we're 60 down to 47%. It certainly has caused a heightened awareness for how we're meeting our students within our fourth grade, but also knowing that this is our current group of fifth graders, and how are we going to grab some of those students. Likely what we saw is students who were proficient one year take a step back and not proficient the next year. Not growing maybe some of our older students or our students who are achieving at the exceeds level, and seeing some changes there. And so we need to really dig into our data and see again at fourth grade where we might have missed some certain things, some areas that we want to develop, but then also look at our current fifth grade group and say, all right, here are some areas that we can certainly see that they might be missing, and here are some deficits, and here's why those deficits exist. Go ahead, Dennis.
Quick question on that, because it's fairly glaring that that fourth grade group, if you look back at when they were third graders, that was the group that brought it down as well.
Right.
There's some different dynamics within that age group that's causing that change, or?
I mean, if I were to look at that group in particular, there might be some higher special education numbers in that group than what we might see in some others, and yet at the same time, that's not an excuse for some of the scores. As I broke down some data even more, though, as I broke down the data even more, and maybe this will help answer the question, and it's not just a fourth grade thing, but it's the third, fourth, and fifth grade thing. As I broke down the data a little bit more and looked at our reading scores by subgroups, I noticed that there were a couple of areas that we saw a pretty significant change with a downward trend that probably reflects what we're seeing here. And that would be, we saw a pretty significant change in our boys, or our males. So if I broke it down by female males, we saw a pretty big dip this past year for our males, where they were close to about what the state average was. You can see in many things we're pushing well above it, but that was a group that was closer to the state average or maybe a little bit below. And then the other group was our free and reduced lunch group, where that's a big chunk of our students where we had been achieving fairly high with those students over the last couple of years, where we saw a pretty significant change in that number too. So we can see that there are some pods of students from different areas that maybe we're not reaching math-wise or reading-wise that we would like to see us reach, and we needed to figure out what that plan might be. So that's probably reflective in some of that work as well in last year's fourth grade group, but that's a commonality across all three grade levels. Yes. So if we were to flip to the growth side of things, obviously we're not going to see the growth that we would like to see when we have a proficiency rate at about 47% there. So you can just kind of easily see there that it's just a little over 65%. It pretty matches, pretty close, 66.6%, I guess you could say. So some room to work there. Fifth grade, feel pretty good about where our fifth graders, and you can see that was kind of the high end of our thing with fifth grade, 76.9, almost 77% there. So we were certainly excited about how our fifth graders came through with the work that they did, and just really kind of knocking it out of the ballpark for us. So that was good to see, well above where our state averages are. And then with the growth, pretty reflective of that too, pushing pretty close to 70% as far as that is concerned too. So we know reading is an area, as I mentioned at the top, of where we want to continue to learn, continue to grow as professionals, and continue to collaborate at high levels to ensure that we're meeting the needs of our students. So we shift gears from there. We saw a little decrease in our MCA science, change from 77.8, which 2018, that was really awesome to see, and a little disappointing to see that we had that big of a change, and yet at the same time that's still scoring well above the state expectation there, the state averages. And at 60.3 might be a little bit closer to where we've been historically, outside of maybe some 66 and 68 there too. So we know that this, though, is a team effort. That although it's our fifth graders who take this test, this is a test that goes all the way back to grabbing standards from third grade and above. And so this certainly reaches all of our students, and it's not just a fifth grade exclusive thing. This goes far back for us. So we can see that there's some opportunity for growth here in science too. English language proficiency or progress towards target and then meeting target. You can see our data there as well, above where the district and the state is at about 68.7%. Percent meeting target, just a little bit above at 44.8. As John mentioned a little bit before me, working with Amy Young out of the Minnesota Department of Education, to have her spend some time in our buildings and help us work on strategies that can help meet the needs of our EL students is certainly a great resource for us. That's continuing this year as well. And so we look to see how her presence, how her professional development continues to help us grow English language-wise. And then consistent attendance, 90% of our students, so pretty good, but we still look at that as a 10% of our students not being here 90% of the time. That's a significant chunk of our students. And when we look at 10% of our students last year at 340 students, I mean, I can tell you that's a big number for us. And we've worked really hard as a building. We've worked really hard with the school counselor and school social worker to be connecting with those families, checking in with them to see what might some of the challenges be, and work with them to get them at school on time. And we have successes, and there are some areas where we continue to see what door we can open to find those successes. But we hope to improve on that 90% from last year for sure. So that kind of wraps up the slide side of things, as I kind of shared to the what does this all mean and what is the next side of things, or what are we doing to, address some of this stuff. And, I feel like I'm very blessed with a very professional and very committed staff at Lakeview Elementary School. As I shared with you, very honest with our reading data to begin with, to know that this is an area that causes some concern, and that's not easy for teachers to always say and to admit without maybe some struggle. But it didn't take long for teachers to raise their hand and be like, yep, we've got some challenges here. And so what are we doing about that? The other teachers talked a little bit about year 2 of the RGR Phonics with that program. I can only see that that's going to continue to benefit our students, because we see that there are some foundational skills that a lot of our kids, K2, really need to continue to work on, and that can only add benefit to the work that our students in 3-5 are doing as well. And some of that takes a change in teacher practice to get that up and going and what have you, but year 2 is certainly a big part of that. A big part of our conversation back to school year was talking about, well, what is the right work? We talk about let's do the right work, but what does that really mean? And so we try to frame a lot of the work that we're doing this year around that premise of what is the right work. And our collaborative teams, or PLC teams, grade level teams, have come a long way this year with really being even more focused and driven with the work that they're doing. Although we have grade levels that are new to one another this year, 5th grade in particular, some changes at kindergarten, some changes at 1st grade, we can see that the foundational blocks for growing together are certainly there. We're continuing our work on the standards of identifying what's important at each grade level. We've implemented this year a push-in model for our reading time for WIN. You may have heard about that from maybe something similar at the other elementary buildings, but we're looking to utilize a lot of our resources to go in for a block of time to really narrow down the work that our students might need. And that's through identifying them through the different data pieces that we have. We see that there's a deficit with a group of kids here, or need some additional work in this part of phonics, in this part of reading, in this part of how they're comprehending things. Then we put together a group that way, and we have an adult in front of them, helping them support them through that. And we're really excited about how that looks. It's not the easiest or cleanest thing that we're doing at this point in time, but nothing ever is easy. Nothing is ever clean, and we understand that, and we appreciate it, and we work together to understand what those next steps are. So that's really been a big piece of what we're doing. Of course, our instructional coordinator, or instructional coach rather, has been a big part of the growth that our students continue to do as well. They work a lot closely with Nicole to help have a lot of that stuff get pulled together, so that having that instructional coach there to help support our teachers is really, really beneficial. When we look at the social emotional side of things, we're in our third year of Second Step with our second year with our counselor. You might remember we had one counselor the first year we had it, and then she moved on to a different school district, and so now we're finally into a year 2 with a counselor working with our students. So we're certainly excited to see how that impact is going to be with our learners K through 5 as well. So that's really exciting. We've also started to work into some initial stages of trauma-informed schools and how do we help support our students as adults in our building through that lens of trauma and what they're going through, and how do we help meet their needs, which is a super important part of what we want to accomplish too. And responsive classroom. Mr. Mahal talked a little bit about that too. The district has been very committed to the responsive classroom approach and has been very helpful with making sure that our teachers are trained so that we can help that social-emotional side of things, social-emotional learning side of things, and responsive classroom certainly helps that. And I can say without a doubt that some of those social-emotional side of things played a big part in how we started our school year off this year. We've welcomed over 80 new students to Lakeview Elementary School this year. And we always know that's going to be a transition anytime a school year starts and we have new students coming. And yet at the same time, welcoming 85 students is a big undertaking. And yet our teachers have been committed since day one, before day one, to make sure that that transition goes smoothly, to make sure that transition for each and every one of our students, no matter where they're coming from, no matter what year they are in Lakeview with us, that their year starts off on the positive foot, and I think we've been able to accomplish that. Lots of positive comments and feedback from our community just about the start of the school year. So we're looking forward to seeing where this year takes us. So that's Lakeview in a nutshell. Questions, comments?
Yeah, we changed the boundaries for Sibley and Lakeview. How's that working out? Does that affect? I'm assuming that. Well, I don't know. It would affect the types of students that you have as opposed to what you had before.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly feel additional students in our building, and when I look at, I think the most recent count was 425 or 426 in our building. That's a pretty significant difference from where we were last year and the year before, and yet it's not different from where Lakeview has been in the past. So although we feel it in our building, it's not like it's new to us. It's not that different for us. It's just a lot of routine building, right? So whether it's a student who came to us from Sibley or from Halverson or from Hawthorne, there are times where you can identify that and say, oh, that's a fourth grader or a third grader who came to us from a different building because they do this little routine a little bit differently, right? Because at Lakeview, we do it this way, but at their building, they learned it a different way. So there's some reteaching that way. But in terms of class sizes, in terms of how we're meeting the needs of our students, we haven't really seen that big of a change. Our class sizes are still at a very reasonable number. We've been very fortunate, and I appreciate the support of the board and from the district office here to make sure that those class sizes still remain intact, and we're not at any point busting at the seams, nor are we in a position where we feel like there's so many students in one classroom that it's hard for us to maneuver and to move around. But we certainly feel transition time, inside recess with all this lovely rain the last few days, the lunchroom, we can feel 170 students is a little bit different, or maybe 150 than maybe just pushing 100 students in one area. So we feel it, Neil, but it's not one that is unfamiliar to us.
Did you sense any difficulty that some students had in adjusting to the transition from Sibley to Lakeview?
I've not heard anything at all, and I've made a priority of trying to connect with families. to just get a feel for that. And it was important for me, but it was important for our staff to try to set everything up in a way that is nothing but welcoming for our students. We kind of kicked things off in, it was actually the Monday before the state fair, so forgive me the time, but it was the Monday before the state fair. We had a little ice cream social for all families to come to Lakeview, so we wanted to have a soft start to things. So that new students would be able to maybe connect with their teachers, be able to connect with new families, and know that the first time they come to our building isn't the day of conferences. And we had a really great turnout of families, and I was a little nervous that we would see only our new families and not a lot of our existing families. And then at that point in time, did it accomplish what we wanted to accomplish? But we had a massive turnout across all grade levels, across all backgrounds that came. And in fact, it's something that I heard not only from parents, but from teachers afterwards saying, Nick, we need to keep doing that from year to year to year because it just really helped connect us in a lot of ways. So that was one way to help start things off. And then the other way that we did it was we just wanted to make sure that we made a point of connecting our kids and the families to Lakeview with just simple things of welcoming them and connecting with them. And I've had parents come to me and just say, you know, Nick, I wasn't sure how the transition was going to go. I wasn't against it, but I know it was going to be hard for my child just because it was many years at one building, and now you're coming here. And within the first day, second day, he or she came home and said, I love my teacher, I have great friends, just no mention of, I want to go back to a different building. So I give all the credit in the world to our teachers for creating that environment for our students to know that they're welcomed and that they're going to feel good about coming to their new building, because we understood it would be hard for them and for our parents. But multiple parents have come to me. I've had teachers come to me and say, you know, Nick, I've had a couple parents come to me and say nothing but positive things about the transition and how well it has gone. So we're very fortunate and very happy about that. It's not to say that things weren't happening that way or that there are people that are maybe a little bit unhappy about it, but if there are, I haven't heard of it. Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely.
The feedback I've received has been fantastic.
Mm-hmm.
It went really smooth.
Good.
I have a question.
Yes.
Regarding the trauma-informed response, I'm glad to hear that that's happening. How do you evaluate the students who have indeed gone through trauma? Are you looking at more ethnic groups that are coming in, or do you do any kind of individual assessment, or just address traumas as you're aware of them?
I think it's a little bit more of the last piece that you mentioned, Jill, of just address trauma as we get to know them. I mean, we're not doing any sort of individualized assessments to really identify some of that. But what I will share is that, you know, at all buildings, but I'll speak for Lakeview, we've got an awesome counselor and we've got an awesome social worker where they've built some fantastic relationships and connections with our students, where our students feel safe to come and talk to them about things. And so I'll oftentimes become aware of something that's going on through our social worker, through our counselor, where they'll share that, you know, Nick just knows something might be going on. They won't share who it is or what might be happening or, you know, get into any specifics like that, but it's more of the just know that there might be something a little bit more there. And then what we do is we try to address things on a global level in terms of if you see some of these behaviors coming from kids, it may or may not be a response to a trauma that they have had in the past, and here's how you might be able to respond to it. But we're really on just the very basic beginning edges of getting into this, but our staff has been very responsive to it. Our social worker, she came to the Albert Lee District from I think North St. Paul School District up in the cities, and she had a lot of experience with trauma-informed school and practices up there, and so she's been able to kind of share some of that with our staff so that we have some background knowledge of it, and we have some tools in our toolbox to work with our students. But we're definitely just on the beginning foundational steps of it. But it's a lot of, if you see these things happen, here's why it might be happening, and here's how you can respond to it that might be effective.
Thank you. And I noticed the bar graphs are the same for your school. Would somebody be able to contact the
do it right
state? Is
now.
it the state that generates those?
I'm going to explain it right now.
If, 'cause
Kathy will get
Yeah.
it for us.
So I asked Ashley to bring up Hawthorne's. So if you look right there, up to the language, it says to comply with federal laws, changes have been made in the Minnesota report card to protect the identity of students. Data reported on less than 10 students of a category will no longer be available in the assessment reports in the Minnesota report card. So that is the same graph you saw before, and if you see down towards the bottom, 2017, 18, 19, you'll see where it says CTSTR, that's a cell size too small to report. So all of those in exceeds, all the way down the line, are less than 10 students. So, and then in 2017, Jill, which is what you pointed out, in particular, you'll see that partially meets and does not meet also are cell size too small to report. So publicly, I remember, if you remember this summer, we talked about some of the data pieces and that MDE would be scrubbing the data a little bit more this year. Here is where that looks like. So thank you for bringing that up. We didn't really have that pointed out to the principals in their slides. So do we have the data internally? Yes, but we can't publicly share that. So thank you.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Yeah.
So how does that, so the scrubbing then would show up in the bar graph? Does it also show up in the percentages that we are seeing?
Correct. You'll see down there, you don't get a percentage for exceeds. For instance, for 2017, you don't get a percentage for partially meets, and you don't get a percentage for does not meet.
Oh, I see. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for asking.
Okay, any other questions?
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Great job.
So just to clarify, Kathy, so that would mean that, let's say, these graphs would show that Nick was down in a certain area, maybe 5% or 3%, and it could have been that, I don't want to keep it in that high a percentage, so those 10 students could have been 1% or whatever. It could have been that they weren't. We just don't, you guys know that.
We know that.
We don't.
Yeah, and so one of the things I think that we've talked about as a district is, yes, you have percentage, but you also have those growth figures. And so the growth pie charts are nice to see, but yes, and this is our first year experiencing this. So, so if Ashley, for instance, were to click on where it says exceeds in the blue box there, yep, clicks there, and then she clicks partially meets, and then she clicks does not meet, that's what you can compare. Because that's really all that's public enough. Now, we can compare across multiple schools, so all 4 schools, because we probably wouldn't have cell sizes too small to report, but, yeah. Data. Thank
Okay.
you.
Yep, thank you very much. Thanks, Nick. I'd entertain a motion then to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Meeting is adjourned.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
You going to sing again? Going to sing again?
Yeah.